Thank you. And once again, good morning. So my name is Armi Taipale. I'm the Capital Markets Department here at the Finnish Financial Supervisory Authority. And I'm also a board member in the ESMA, as well as the management board. And I'm chairing also the ESMA's Data Standing Committee and the ESAP task force, which leads the joint committee policy work on ESAP in close cooperation with EBA and EIOPA. So as you all probably are aware, ESAP is or has been action 1 point of the 2020 action plan for the Capital Markets Union and has been seen as a fundamental missing piece of our Capital Markets Union. And one of the key objectives of establishing a European single access point is to provide for seamless EU-wide access to all relevant information, including financial and sustainability-related information disclosed to the public by companies in EU capital markets. After 2 years of negotiations, the ESAP regulation was published in the EU official journal on late December last year. And now it's for ESMA and for the joint committee with the support of all relevant stakeholders to make it happen. This will be a long journey, which is only starting now, but will last for many years to come. The project has a very broad scope, covering information from 35 legislative frameworks, over 200 data flows. It is very valuable for us to be able to rely on the input and feedback of the market, and we count on your support throughout this journey. And thank you for all being here today. I also want to thank those of you who have indicated an interest of being part of ESAP ad hoc group to support ESMA's in the implementation of ESAP, and we are very grateful for your time and effort. And ESMA staff will be in touch with you as soon as possible to communicate further details. So for today and for the purpose of this opening hearing is to provide you with an overview and give the opportunity to raise questions and comments on the key aspects of the consultation paper on the implementing technical standards that the ESAs Joint Committee has a mandate to prepare pursuant to Article 5 and 7 of the ESAP regulation. You can choose to provide comments by taking the floor during today's session, or just take this opportunity to raise any questions or doubts that you might have, and thereafter provide your comments in writing using the ad hoc form available on ESMA's website. And the deadline for comments is 8th of March. Your feedback will be duly taken into consideration by the Joint Committee in the process of preparing the final report, which is due for publication by the 3rd quarter of this year. Once it's finalized, the ITSs contained in that final report will be submitted to the European Commission, and following adoption will become EU law and will contribute to building the backbone of the whole ESAP system. Today's discussion therefore needs to focus on this very important policy work pursuant to Articles 5 and 7 of the ESAP regulation. We therefore kindly ask you to focus your comments and questions on aspects dealt with by the consultation paper and not expect us to deal with or delve into details of IT implementation or of specific data flows, as that goes beyond the purpose of today's session. There will be further opportunities to discuss those aspects in the future. So thank you all for participating today. And now I would hand over the floor to Anna to present the project. So please, Anna.
We're checking the audio. It doesn't work. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Shortino. I'm Senior Policy Officer at ESMA, and I will be taking you through the slides we have prepared for you today. First of all, many thanks for being here and for being so numerous in showing your interest in this project. Thank you, Armi, for the opening remarks. So first of all, just to explain to you how the session today is going to work. This is the agenda. So I'll be taking you through, for the next probably hour, we will be going through slides. We will discuss how the ESAP legislative package has ended up being following negotiation and what it looks like now that it is published in the official journal of the EU. So we will take you through the main points of the legislation, starting with why we need a European single access point, the key features of the ESAP system as foreseen in level 1 legislation, the scope of the information contained in the ESAP, the timelines foreseen also by the level 1 legislation published in the official journal, and the level 2 legislative mandates as attributed to the joint committee or to one of the ESAs individually. We will then move on to the 2 ITS mandates the joint committee has pursuant to Article 7 and then to Article 5 of the ESAP regulation. And then we will go into next steps and open the floor for Q&As. I will pause after every slide to give you the maximum opportunity to raise questions or doubts. And we will then wrap up at the end with opening floor to questions concerning any aspect of today's presentation you may want to refer back to. The slides will be circulated after the meeting, so no need to worry about that. And we can obviously move back and forth in the slide deck if you wish us to, and you have specific questions. As mentioned by Armi, we would like to invite you to focus your comments and questions specifically on the topic of the consultation paper, which is Article 7 and 5 mandates, and not delve too much into the IT implementation and the sectorial mandate specifically, as that's beyond the scope of today's session. And without further ado, we can move on to the first slide. So first, and in the next few slides, I would like to give you a broad introduction of what is the European Single Access Point. The legal text was published in December last year, and we realize that many of you may not yet be familiar with it, as you're last seen the legal text back when the European Commission put forward its legislative proposal in 2021. So, as many of you are surely aware of, there is currently no centralized search system to access information disclosed by companies in EU capital markets. Information at the moment is fragmented both along national lines, because each member state has its own databases for public information, but it also scattered across different types of information and different legislative frameworks, meaning each piece of legislation often foresees a different registry or a database for collecting that information, either at national or EU level. Therefore comes the need of having a centralized access. This project actually has a long history, and it is not new. So it was great from our perspective to see finally a European single access point proposal seeing the light. Obviously, an issue is also that the majority of information that is made available to the public, it's in a human readable format only in PDF, which locks up the value of the data and makes it difficult to consume. Plus, the use and reuse of information is made harder by the fact that information is disclosed in many different national languages without translations being provided. Sometimes terms of use are so that it is not possible to download and use the information freely, or it is not possible to bulk download it. So one has to manually download each data point separately. In some cases, information is available only after paying for fees, and there may not be a harmonized level of supervision of that data, nor possibility to enforce data quality and the integrity of data. All of these are the reasons why the co-legislators have agreed to propose to set up a European single access point and mandated ESMA to develop the European single access point. Next slide, please. So what the information that will be in the scope of ESAP is provided in this slide, which I realize may look like a nightmare at first if you're not familiar with the many acronyms in the EU financial sector legislation, but we will be providing in annex. We are providing in annex the list of acronyms, so worry not if this looks very confusing. But this is just to show you how the scope of information has changed between the European Commission proposal and the final level 1 text that was published in December. And for what the most important thing to retain is that we still have 3 phases of ESAP. So we have a phase 1 that includes the prospectus regulation, the short selling regulation, and the transparency directive. And we will look at the timeline in the next slide. Phase 2 is much broader. So we have 9 regulations and 2 directives. We have information related to benchmarks, to credit rating agencies, USEF and UVICA, market abuse, PEP and PRIPS, and sustainable finance disclosures pursuant for funds. This is when it comes to regulations. We'll also have the accounting directive and the UCITS information published pursuant to the UCITS directive. So as you will see, we start with a small phase 1 scope, and then phase 2, it's much broader and includes a big variety of information. Phase 3 finally opens up to everything else. And so we have the audit directive, we have credit resolution, LTIF, green bond standards, market in crypto assets, MiFIR, MiFID, SFTR. I mean, I will not read it all out, but basically it's everything else that is published as public information in financial markets that will end up in ESAP in phase 3. Compared to the European Commission proposal, you may be more familiar with the CCP resolution directive has been regulation has been removed from the scope. CSDR has been removed, and so also EMIR. Whilst MiCA, so market in crypto assets, and the EU green bond regulation have now been added, and you will find them in phase 3. Next slide, please. So what does this mean in terms of detailed type of information? I will not go through the list of types of information which will be accessible on ESAP as set out by level 1, but you can make reference to our consultation paper, where we are indicating for each article which the co-legislators mandated ESMA to foresee disclosures in ESAP for, the detailed types of information for that legislative framework. For example, the example in the slide, which is taken from page 29 of the Joint Committee consultation paper, foresees that Directive 2004/109, which is also known as Transparency Directive, we can distinguish within that directive a number of types of information: annual financial reports, annual financial statements, management reports, etc., etc. So I invite you to take a look at the consultation paper to identify the exact types of information which the co-legislator have asked us to include in the scope of ESAP. Next slide, please. And I realize I said at the beginning I will stop at the end of each slide. Please allow me to stop at the end of this section because we're dealing with level 1 rather than at the end of every slide, as that may be excessive. So this is just a broad overview of the ESAP timeline. And allow me to remind you that the timeline is established in level 1. So it was established by the co-legislators. So publication was already mentioned in the official journal was in December 2023, and the ESAP regulation is coming to force in January 2024. The first milestone for this project is the delivery to the European Commission of the Joint Committee implementing technical standards pursuant to Article 5 and 7 of the ESAP regulation. The deadline set by the legislation is September 2024. And as you will see, this is a joint committee mandate, meaning the three European Supervisory Authorities, ESMA, EBA, and EIOPA, have been jointly working, are jointly working on this project. This is the deliverable we are here to discuss today, and it is what we would like you to focus on today. But in terms of system development, what's going to happen next is that once the ESAP functionalities and tasks of collection bodies will be defined by level 2 legislation, we will be working for 21 months to set up the system and make it ready for the reporting starting date, which is July 2026. That means that reporting will start, but it will not yet be made available to the public. So the idea here, the co-legislators have asked ESMA to set up the ESAP, but in order to make sure that it's not an empty shell when it goes live to the public, there is a year of time at least, a year of time between when the reporting entities will start reporting to the collection bodies and collection bodies will start reporting to ESAP. So that there will be some information available to ESAP when it is made available to the public. The relevant date for users is when phase 1 publication starts, and that will be July 2027 at the latest. At the latest means that this is the final deadline set in the legislation, but if possible, ESMA will try to anticipate that date. Phase 2 is much closer in time to phase 1 than one could think at first, because it's actually January 2028. So only 6 months after phase 1 publication starts. So only 6 months after phase 1 publication starts, we will have phase 2 reporting and publication starting. So all the information I've shown you in the previous slide will be both reported by reporting entities and published at the same time by ESMA and ESAP by January 2028. At this point, there will be a pause, let's say, of reflection to take stock of what has happened until now. There will be a report prepared by the European Commission in cooperation with ESMA to see how things are going with ESAP, what's working, what is not, and whether there needs to be an additional time granted to ESMA to proceed to phase 3. But if everything goes well and no further delays are necessary, phase 3 reporting and publication will start in January 2030. So for those of you who may have been familiar with the Commission proposal back in 2021, the timeline has changed quite significantly. We'll still have the 3 phases, but those are a bit more delayed in time, allowing more time for implementation, both for reporting entities and for collection bodies. Next slide, please. And finally, in this slide, I'd like to give you an overview of what the features of ESAP will be. Again, these are set out by level 1. In terms of user experience, ESMA has a mandate to develop a user-friendly web portal interface. This will be hosted by ESMA, and we have the obligation that the search tool must be based on a set number of metadata fields. These are listed in Article 7.3, and we will talk about that further later, as this is one of the mandates the Joint Committee has to expand on in level 2 work. There will be an API to enable easy access to information by users. So the API will be accessible to all, to easily have the information at hand and download the information, including for bulk download. And this is also something we will further discuss later on. There will be a service for automated translation of the information and a notification service. So as you see, in terms of user experience, this should be very user-friendly and very easy to really facilitate the accessibility of information compared to the experience today. The data will be available for free including for downloads. There is a provision for ESMA to to assess whether it's relevant to impose fees, but this is something we will consider much later after the information after ESAP has been set up on the basis of data use and is not imminent. And for phase 1, you can definitely expect to be able to access the information for free. The metadata that accompanies the information submitted by reporting entities, it is set out by the Omnibus Directive and Regulation, which accompanies the ESAP regulation itself. So the obligation for reporting entities that stem from ESAP are included in level 1 legislation. The Omnibus is a directive. There are 2 pieces of legislation. One is an Omnibus Directive, one is an Omnibus Regulation, which amend other regulations and directives. And there are systematically provisions requiring reporting entities to disclose limited number of additional metadata items. And that is going to be, it's the only additional, very small reporting requirement for metadata that will be foreseen under the ESAP on the basis of level 1. There's not going to be additional disclosure of information, as the Commission has mentioned repeatedly in its holy communication, although there will be some additional requirement when it comes to metadata. The information available on ESAP will be systematically in a data extractable format, or when mandated by level 1 in a machine readable format. And there will be open standard licenses to ensure free use and reuse. And we will delve into all these aspects in the next few slides when we look at the joint committee mandates. It is also, in terms of collection, I think it's important to realize that ESAP is a 2-tier system. So we have collection of information will be first at the level of a collection body, and later the collection bodies, or immediately later, collection bodies will be sending this information to ESAP. So from a reporting entity perspective...
Sì, no, sto sentendo una cosa...
I think we will try to mute you if you hear. Please mute yourself when speaking. If not, we will be forced to mute you, which will be a shame if you want to raise a question. So I was saying that collection under the ESAP system is a 2-tier collection system, a 2-tier collection method. So for reporting entities report information to a designated collection body. What the collection body is depends on the specific data flow. It is established in the Omnibus, where it says either level 1 already specifies who the collection body is, or gives the task to the member state to designate a specific collection body for certain types of information. Only after that, the collection body will submit information to ESAP via an API, so what we call a data collection API. Last but not least, information can be voluntarily submitted on ESAP, but this will only be possible from phase 3, so from 2030. And with this, we come to the last slide of the introduction, covering the level 1 changes compared to the Commission proposal. So to wrap up, we have 3 relevant pieces of regulation that were published in the official journal last year. One is the ESAP regulation, another one is the Omnibus Directive, and then we have an Omnibus regulation. The ESAP regulation includes 3 mandates for the Joint Committee to develop implementing technical standards. Of these 3 mandates, 2 have a 9-month deadline, and these are the ones we are here to discuss today. So we have published a consultation paper, as you know, on 8th of January, and there will be 2 months to respond to that consultation. There is also a mandate on fees, which does not have a legal 1 deadline. And as I mentioned, for the time being, this is not imminent. We will think about this depending on data use, and that we will confirm the timeline at a later stage. As I was mentioning, the ITSs we will discuss today are developed by the Joint Committee. We have, and for that, I want to thank colleagues from EBA and EIOPA who are currently on the line, which together with us here at ESMA are contributing to the development of this ITSs. ESMA is taking the lead in the development of this policy work through agreed governance with the other ESAs, exactly because ESMA will be in charge of developing the platform. But this is just to flag that the other ESAs are also closely involved and are supporting our work to develop these joint committee ITSs. It is also important to note that on top of the work we are already carrying out, there's other mandates in the Omnibus Directive and regulation. There is 6 mandates to develop ITSs for ESMA, 3 for EBA, and 2 for EIOPA contained in the Omnibus Directive. These mandates do not have a deadline, and the timeline, therefore, is at the discretion of the ESAs or of the Joint Committee. But this mandate allows us to mandate additional metadata for reporting entities, mandate additional structuring of the information that has to be disclosed, or to require that a machine-readable format is used. Obviously, all of this will have to be consulted upon, so stakeholders will be duly informed of any steps that is taken in this direction and will have the opportunity to provide comments if necessary. Same goes for the Omnibus regulation. There's 8 mandates to develop ESMA ITSs, 2 mandates to develop Joint Committee ITSs, 2 ITSs for the European Banking Authority, and 1 ITS for the European Insurance and Occupational Pension Authority. These 2 are mandates about metadata, structuring of the information, and machine-readable format of disclosures. And similarly to the Omnibus Directive mandates, there is no level 1 deadline, and the timeline, therefore, it's at our discretion. We have not yet started working on these, and stakeholders will be duly consulted. I will take a pause here to see if any doubts, concerns, comments want to be raised. Obviously, this is just because we are giving you this opportunity in case there may be doubts. We are not obviously holding the pen when it comes to level 1 development. So all we can do is try to explain what's in level 1. But this session is more to ensure that we are on the same level, starting level of information, as that is fundamental to build. This is what we are building on with our level 2 work.
Okay, yes, okay, hands are raising, good. Just to apologize first that in case I'm not able to pronounce your name correctly, so for all of you taking the floor, so apologies for that. And if you could all, when taking the floor, present your shelves and your organization, that would be great. So I have first one, Jan Stange, and sorry for the pronunciation. Okay, I think that.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, now we can hear you. Good morning.
I will listening. There's a workshop from EFAMA about the European access point. I will share with you guys also later, but I will unmute.
Okay, I think that we lost the first speaker, perhaps, and then I have David. And now I'm not trying to pronounce your last name, sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. David Siolfi, I'm working with Mazar. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. I think someone else had the same question than me. I was wondering why we can't see CSRD in the final version.
Thank you, and that gives us the opportunity to respond also to the question in the chat. This is going to be a technical answer, so bear with me. But as some of you may already be aware, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive technically was an amendment to the Accounting Directive. So the way this has been structured by the co-legislators is that the CSRD is handled via the Accounting Directive that, as you see, it's in phase 2. We've made a tiny footnote in this slide to say that taxonomy regulation and I'm happy to specify the CSRD are in phase 2. and are dealt with via the accounting directive. So this is it's a matter of legal drafting, but CSRD has not been removed at all. I think the co-legislators are very clear and very determined to make sustainability information available through ESAP. This was one of the motives behind the creation of a European single access point. So CSRD is not removed, it's handled via, it's called accounting directive for the purpose of the final level 1 text.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for this question, which I'm sure many others were interested in.
Thank you. And then I have Vivek Nanda.
Thank you. Vivek Nanda, Head of Market Development, Capital Markets for Capgemini, based out of Nordics. So one of my points is when I look at the timeline, it's very well paced. But when I look at the timeline of publication of statistics, when the first phase is going live on July 2027, and the phase 2 publication is in January 2028. So what is the plan? How do you look at this is possible? For me, I think the focus on phase 1 is around certain regulations, and then we have a wide set of regulations in phase 2 for reporting purposes. How do we ensure that the participants who would be providing the information are ready within a 6-month phase time?
Thank you. I react right away. Yeah. So actually, the relevant delay for reporting entities is between July 2026 and January 2028. So there will actually be a 1.5 years of delay when it comes to reporting entities being submitted to new obligations. Let's also not forget that we're talking about very different entities in scope. So we have a very broad scope of information submitted to ESAP, but that also means there is a very broad scope of reporting entities. So only few entities will be object to obligations, both in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. It's normally different types of entities. And we deem that it is clear enough. We are now in 2024. We will be communicating both at our level, at European level, and at national level about the new obligations kicking in with ESAP. But we expect actually that the obligation for reporting entities will be of limited impact
exactly.
to the reporting entities.
I think default is proposed.
So it's the new obligations will be to accompany the information with few additional metadata items and format those metadata items in a certain way. But we are dealing with information that today is already made available to the public, either on companies' websites or through a database at EU or national level. So there is no additional disclosure obligation coming from ESAP. Therefore, we think that the timeline planned by the co-legislators is largely achievable by reporting entities. Should not pose a problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have Ignacio. And I'm sorry about the pronunciation once again.
Ignacio Boiso, thank you very much for this opportunity. So first of all, congratulations for the effort, because as Ana Estefanino commented, have a long history behind. And I have 2 points. One point is I wish the best luck with the current incumbents, because as Ana Estefanino commented, part of the information is not easily accessible, especially for free. There are information that are accessible for a fee, and this may create problems. So I wish you good luck solving this problem. But anyway, my question is about voluntary reporting. Currently, the FRAG is in an exercise of voluntary reporting for small and medium enterprise in sustainability. The point is that companies, after the effort of prepare voluntary reports, basically have no place where to publish this information. I think this is a suggestion to reconsider the point of delay the voluntary reporting for ESAP at the very end. Advantage. First, the voluntary reporting have no problems of current incumbents, no problems of fee, no problems on anything. It's absolutely a technical problem. It's not a business problem. And the second may also encourage as a FRAG in sustainability or other reporting frameworks for voluntary reporting, because in the last mile, how the end user assess the information voluntary reported is solved with a FRAG. It's simply a suggestion. And congratulations for your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. Just a very quick reaction. As I tried to explain at the beginning, the timeline is set in level 1 legislation, which has been established by the co-legislators in very long and difficult negotiations. This is not up to ESMA to change the time of phase 3. Voluntary information is currently only allowed, explicitly only allowed in phase 3. Therefore, it will not be possible for ESMA to single-handedly allow reporting of voluntary information before then. This is something it cannot be handled at our level. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you to you.
Thank you. And then I have Jan, and I think that we lost you first time, so please.
Yes, indeed. Sorry. So my name is Jan Stang. I'm working for FIBIS, for the Federation of Business Information Services. I have one question concerning the metadata that was mentioned before, concerning the use and reuse. Will this only be possible in phase 1 or afterwards in general?
Definitely. Always possible. This is one of the key features of ESAP to enable use and reuse of information. So it's not only for phase 1.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And then there's Maxime Arts.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Good morning. So Maxime Arts. So I'm working at Fundinfo. And in a nutshell, we help our clients, the asset managers and banking, channel the information to the recipients, including NCAs. And in the context of the implementation of the ESAP, it has been discussed that there is a 2-layer model. So from supervised entity to NCA as collection body, and from collection body NCAs to the ESAP. So whichever requirement that is being defined between the NCA and the ESAP will be cascaded to the supervised entity in terms of data provision. So, and they came to us and say, well, we anticipate as supervised entity big changes to provide the information to our collecting bodies in order for them to be compliant with the data provision to the ESAP. So that's a fear they face with regards to the change to come, even if we remain in the context of the current legislation framework. They fear that their local domestic NCAs will impose some enhancement to the data provision processes in place. And if we look at what has been announced here with regards to new technical standards to come, it will likely be a second wave of changes to come that will be applicable for them as well. So in order to make the ESAP becoming a success and having some homogeneous information, changes will be cascaded. Is that taken into account in terms of scheduling of the implementation of ESAP? So meaning the limitation of the effort that will be imposed to supervised entity to make sure that end-to-end we ensure the quality and we simplify the how to address the challenge at industry level.
Thank you very much for that comment. All I can say is that we're very conscious of the effort that it takes reporting entities to report additional information. And I want to reassure you that any changes at national level also involve very high level of efforts from the collection bodies, the national competent authorities. So we are all in this together in the attempt to minimize the changes and maximize the simplicity of this process coming into place. So we have, as you rightly pointed out, the work we're doing concerns the interface mainly between ESAP and the collection bodies. There might be additional changes coming from between the collection bodies and the reporting entities. That is not the object of our work, strictly speaking, but national competent authorities and national collection bodies are also subject to strong limitations when it comes to resources and available, and will definitely pay a very close attention to make sure that the changes are only the very strict minimum is imposed on reporting entities.
Thanks.
Thank you. And if I may add to Anna's point that phase 2 and 3 are going to be the most difficult, because there is going to be a lot of information that is currently published at the internet and not reported to the NCAs. So how to find a way to have that information from the internet sites to NCAs and to ESAP, and probably even more how to have two points of entry, so to say. So maybe just from the reporting entity to ESAP or something like that. But we are on a process of thinking of that. So we have recognized that there are many difficult issues to solve. But then moving on, I think there's Jacob Gertel.
Yes, hi, good morning to all. I'm Jacob Gertel, working for SIX. I have a questions concerning the existing databases and registers from the ESMA. Would they be integrated into the ESAP according to the phase plan?
So this will probably be addressed in a phased approach. So we'll start with information from phase 1, then phase 2, phase 3. And then we will probably try have a single platform on ESMA website to publish all the information. When and how we will transition is still something to be defined. And for now, we will be focusing on setting up the platform for the ESAP and for phase 1. But
okay.
It is indeed ultimately our goal to have a single publication of the data on the ESMA side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then I have Arne Petterman.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I've got a question on the APIs. What percentage of access to the API will be guaranteed? Is this 95 or maybe 100%?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So you wanted to, I'm not sure I get all your question properly. You wanted to know if all the information published on ESAP will also be accessible through the API. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So we will provide an API for searching information and for downloading information. We will have to see what will be the usage in order to see what limit we need to put there to avoid misuse of the portal. In terms of scope of the information, it would be the full scope of information. Again, we may need to set limits in terms of volume of downloads per day, per user, number of concurrent requests, things like that, technical limits. And then later on, we'll have to see if certain usage is very costly from a maintenance perspective, and whether we need to put in place some fees for specific services. But in terms of scope of information, we would not plan to restrict the information available through the API.
Thank you. Then I have Jean-Philippe Capra.
Hi, Jean-Philippe, working for SACGEN and also chairing the French Structured Product Association. I have a question regarding the way cooperation can be operated within or with the public sector, the private sector. To be clear, there is an impact question. You did mention the fact that most of the information which is concerned by ESAP is either already reported or already disclosed. However, for the information which is disclosed but not reported, and I think of PRIPS, we discussed already with the EMF, and I'm not sure there was a strong realization of how staggering the volumes of KID actually is. To give you a brief example, just for SocGen only, we issue 6 million KIDs per year, and this is linked to the fact that it may be not taken into consideration, but we deal also with securitized options. Those may have different strikes, and the minute a product is on the offering, you need to have a KID. My question is not to lament about the volume, but more to say that there are already existing industry solutions to collect this information, gather it, have a clearing house of information where distributors can connect free of charge. And I was wondering whether we could hope that NCAs or ESMA would consider those existing solutions in the development of their own solutions to collect information in order to avoid duplication, because we think that would be really a loss if those solutions. And to be clear, the idea is not at all to force everyone to use those solutions, to consider the variety of solutions. There is Reg Exchange in Europe. There is, for example, VM-Daten in Germany. There might be others. But the point is to say in some areas, there are already existing clearinghouse of information that could, and that's their job, could connect to whatever choice is made by either NCAs or the ESMA. And I was just wondering whether that was part of the plan. We know AMF and the French Treasury looked at that with interest, but again, they're not the ones making the ultimate decisions.
I'll be quite direct in my answer, because the answer is just no. We are developing ESAP on the basis of a legal mandate that does not foresee anything but collecting information from collection bodies who will themselves collect it from reporting entities. So there is no scope for us to consider alternative ways of collecting this information. Thank you for your question.
Okay.
Thank you. And it's always the question of each member state to point those collection points, so or bodies, so also up to them to decide. So then the last one I have on the list is Alan Dukas.
Yes, thank you. I will build on the previous question, because I guess that a lot of information is disclosed, and as it was pointed out, in human readable format, and one of the aim of ESAP would be to collect machine readable data. There are some existing standards which has been set up, for example, to distribute in a machine readable format the PRIPS KID information, and so on and so forth, in order to minimize the impact for the implementation of ESAP. Would the NCA consider leveraging on the existing data format in order to facilitate the transition and the reporting? And I may also further add, the data collection will be on a national basis. Will there be some coordination to limit the differences between the processes set up by each collection body? For example, the AMF in France, or difference between France, Germany, and other countries. If in each country there is a different collection process, different data format for data collection, this would be a nightmare for the entities which have present in several countries. So what are the plans of the NCAs on these two topics?
May I please ask you to I didn't quite catch the first question about machine readable formats. I'm not sure what you meant. Do you mind?
Yes, for example, if I take the example of PRIPSKID, the base format of the PRIPSKID, which is published on the website, is a PDF document. However, in order to enable the use of this information between producer and distributors, there has been a data action format on the PRIPSKID information, which has been set up by the industry. So the data required, which is subject, for example, the performance information, cost and charge, and so on, which are in a human readable format in the PRIPSKID PDF document, also exist in a structured data table. It would be easier for all the industry if this kind of standardized data format were reused to collect this information and feed it in the ESAP, as the ESAP aims to collect this data in a machine readable format.
Okay, thank you. So this is something we can discuss later on when looking at our mandate to define what is a data extractable and what is a machine readable format. So at its core, the definitions of what, the definition of what is data extractable and what is machine readable for the purpose of ESAP will be defined at EU level. So we do not expect divergence when it comes to that type of definition. And as I mentioned, the ESAs have a mandate to define what information should be subject to a machine readable format and to consult, and we would have to consult and prepare ITSs. For sure, if there is widespread industry adoption of a machine readable format, that type of information is a good candidate for us to assess whether a machine readable format can be mandated or how that information should be structured. So we will, in due course, consult, assess, and evaluate whether that's something we can build on or whether instead there is little take up or little appetite from the market for us to do that. But thank you for raising that. We will, that's something that pertains to phase 2. So it's a bit later on that we will actually delve into the details. But we are conscious of that specificity of certain reporting frameworks. And with regards to your second question, we hear your point that divergence between the way collection bodies collect information, if they diverge, that could create a problem to certain operators, I would assume, especially to cross-border operators. And we do not have a direct mandate to ensure 100% harmonization in the way collection bodies collect information, but supervisory convergence and convergence between different actors which are active at EU level is one of the tasks that both ESMA and the other ESAs perform for many years. And that's something we are conscious, the risks of, we are conscious, and we will do our everything that's in our power to try to make life of reporting entities as easy as possible. Cannot promise we will be able to deliver perfect harmonization because that's beyond our powers. But I would say that the fact of harmonizing how information is collected by ESAP will somewhat cascade also probably on how collection bodies collect information from reporting entities. That's something we will we have in mind, and we will try to do our best to deal with.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Again, then I have one hand, and that is Claire Elizabeth Fritz.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Claire Elizabeth Fritz, and I'm talking today on behalf of the EU Federation of Business Information Services. This is more or less the same topic than the one on format that has just been discussed. As some directives are including in the framework of ESAP, of course, there are options to be granted to member states. That is to say, in particular for the categories of entities, the sizes of entities. How are these options to be granted that are granted to member states will be will be taken into consideration through ESAP, please? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Actually, as you will see, this is something that I'd like to deal with in the section on size of entities, because the Joint Committee has a mandate to specify how the size of entities within ESAP should be defined. So let us delve into that later on, if you don't mind, in the slide that we dedicate exactly to this topic. So bear with us. Armik, may I just suggest that we take the question? There was a question written in the chat, and then maybe we take one more question and then we move on, and then we can take further questions at the end. But I'd like to be able to go through the entire slide deck.
Yeah. It sounds good. And actually, if we take the one hand that is here, so we have Daniel Ostrovsky, and then we take the one on chat. So Daniel, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's Daniel from S&P Global. And I was also wondering to whether raise this question later when we discuss the consultation on the draft ITS, but as this is already the first round of Q&A, I thought I'd just shoot it out now. So our point is the question how recommercialization by third parties can be prevented or will be prevented in cases where data points that are reported to the ESAP are not only a regulatory disclosure point, but at the same time also a commercial product, such as a credit rating. And we see we have a legitimate interest in preventing third parties from just bulk downloading this data and selling it to third parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Answer will be brief. ESMA protects is subject to IP rights law, and we will ensure that everything we do is in line with existing laws. So we aim to ensure the widest possible use and reuse of data, as long as that is compatible with our obligations stemming from other legal frameworks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I read out the question in the chat before we move on. So the question is, does the implementation starting from 10th of January means that in case of annual reporting, the reference date 31st December of the previous year or of the current year? This is also a question that was submitted. So I understand by this that the question is, what happens for a report with reference date 31st December if the ESAP, the relative ESAP phase starts 1st of January? And so the answer here is quite clear from the ESAP Omnibus, the way the ESAP Omnibus regulation and directive are phrased. So the disclosure obligation kicks in. So the ESAP Omnibus and regulation clarifies when the disclosure obligation to a collection body kicks in. So everything that is made available to the public after that date, be it July 26, January 28, or January 30, from that point onwards, all disclosures have to be accompanied by the relevant metadata and made available to collection bodies. The reference date is not something that is relevant in this context. All that matters is when the information is made available to the public. So please refer to the legal text, to the amendments to the various directives that foresee submission to a collection body and to ESAP thereafter. But yeah, reference date is not what we will be looking at in terms of establishing the disclosure obligation. All right, after that little bit of a marathon of questions, maybe we can move on to the next set of slides, where I'd like to take you through what we're proposing in detail in the Joint Committee ITSs on Article 5 and Article 7 of the ESAP regulation. I will stop after every section, so at the end, after metadata, after automated validation, and so forth, to give you the opportunity to ask questions. We will see how many questions we have. If need be, maybe we will accelerate compared to now, get to the end, and then reopen for questions. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of those of you who submitted questions before at the time of registration, so before this open hearing. We have taken note of your questions, and I hope that the majority of your questions will be answered in the next few slides. Should that not be the case, of course, feel free to intervene either after each section or at the end in the Q&A. And as mentioned before, please try to make sure that your questions are pertinent to the subject of the today's consultation, today's open hearing, i.e. the consultation, as there will be other opportunities to discuss other aspects. Okay, we can move on to the first mandate. So this is not the same order in which you will see the mandates described in the consultation paper. In the consultation paper, we are following the order in which these items are proposed in level 1 as a matter of legal drafting. But in this session, I'd like to first discuss the metadata. And it is really the key component of the ESAP architecture. And that's what we will therefore start with. Just as a general remark about this section, can we go to the previous slide very briefly? So this entire section deals with tasks of collection bodies. So what we are dealing with under Article 5 is the interface between the collection body and ESAP. As some of you correctly pointed out, some of these aspects will cascade down to reporting entities. But what we're discussing here, but that's beyond our mandate. What we're discussing here is what's shared and how that information is shared between the collection bodies and the ESAP platform. Thank you. So on to metadata. Our mandate when it comes to metadata is to specify the characteristics of the metadata necessary for the ESAP search function, of the personal data flag and of any other metadata necessary for the functioning of ESAP. And here we would like to pause 1 second and provide you with an explanation of what type of metadata is foreseen by level 1, because there is different types and it's not very straightforward to grasp that. So the first type of metadata that exists under the ESAP framework is the metadata which accompanies the information submitted by entities. This is already specified in the level 1 Omnibus Directive and Omnibus Regulation. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where entities should look in the Omnibus Directive and Regulation to understand what are their metadata obligations set by level 1. Second type of metadata is the metadata which accompanies the information submitted by entities, but which are not yet mandated and may be mandated in the future by the ESAs, individually or jointly, depending on the legislative area. So these are very similar metadata to the first category, but they are not yet developed. And there is, at the moment, we haven't started working on this. We are assessing whether this is necessary, but this will be, if mandated, they will be the responsibility of the reporting entity to ensure the quality, the accuracy, and so forth. The third type of metadata, and together with the fourth and the fifth type, are the types we're dealing with in this consultation paper, are the metadata which are necessary for the ESAP search functions. And this is already defined in Article 7.3 of the ESAP regulation. So very little discretion over, in fact, no discretion over what the metadata for the ESAP search function shall be. This is defined by the co-legislators in level 1. And our mandate is to specify the characteristics of this metadata. The other metadata we're dealing with is the personal data flag metadata. And this is a new thing in virtually all the legislative frameworks under the scope of ESAP, because systematically the co-legislators have mandated reporting entities to disclose through a metadata whether the information reported includes personal data. This is in light of the very extensive data protection laws we have in the EU, whereby special rules apply to information that contains personal data. Therefore, it is imperative that databases containing this information put in place measures to protect that personal data. So systematically, reporting entities will have to disclose a personal data flag metadata with their information to collection bodies and collection bodies thereafter to ESAP. last category of metadata this consultation paper deals with is the any other metadata which is necessary for the functioning of ESAP. This can be mandated by the ESAs Joint Committee, and this is one of the things we are consulting on in the consultation paper. So our proposed approach when it comes to the metadata being sent from collection bodies to ESAP is as follows. So the metadata should be in a common format in accordance with the in two possible ways, either in accordance with the ISO 20022 methodology, for example, in XML, or when information is submitted in a machine readable format, that metadata could be can be in the same machine readable format as the information. This has to be a common format, meaning that it is not up to the reporting entities to choose what's the format of the metadata. This will be specified by ESMA in additional level 3 work. And it is also relevant to know that whenever metadata information is in a machine readable format and metadata can be embedded in the information, we are leaving that possibility open. So it is possible for the metadata to be embedded in the information when the information is in a machine readable format. How the metadata will be packaged, how it will be submitted, this is something that pertains technical implementation. We will not be discussing this here today, but it will be specified by ESMA in system specifications and additional guidance to collection bodies. The format of the metadata, so the characteristics of the metadata we define in the annex to the ITS. But on top of defining the characteristics of the metadata, we are proposing additional 11 metadata items because we deem that would be necessary for the functioning of the ESAP. There is 7 technical metadata which are necessary for the functioning of the tool, and there is 4 business metadata which are helpful for us to classify the information. This is the home and host member state, the ISIN or product identifier, and the legal framework of the information. This is obviously an area where we can exercise some discretion, and that's why we're very interested in your feedback, especially on this aspect. It's also important to note that the responsibility for the quality of the metadata accompanying the information, so if you remember the slide, the previous slide, the information that are submitted by entities lies with the reporting entity, whilst the responsibility for the quality of the metadata generated by the collection bodies, for example, the technical metadata we are proposing, so 7 of the 11 we are proposing because deemed necessary for the functioning of ESAP, there the responsibility would lie with the collection body. I see a relevant question in the chat, so I would like to take the opportunity to respond. The question from Thomas is, would the personal data flag place limits on the use and reuse of data? And would that include such items and the auditor's name and the name of the directors of a company? So there's no provisions limiting the use and reuse of information in light of the personal data flag. What the ESAP regulation established is limitations to the time in which the collection bodies and ESAP can store that information. The ESAP regulation also requires entities to limit the number of personal data that is included in the information. So to not include personal data unless that is specifically necessary to comply with the requirements. So there's two steps. Reporting entities will have to limit the amount of personal data disclosed unless strictly necessary. And if personal data is disclosed, different rules will apply on the basis of national or EU law in terms of storage, duration of the storage that's allowed. Indeed, auditor's name and name of the directors are personal data. There's other question in the chat, but that's not specifically on metadata, so I'd like to pause here and see if there's any other questions from the audience about metadata.
Okay,
there's another question from John, but I will handle that when we come to industry sectors and LEI, if you don't mind. There's a hand up.
Yeah, so Rudolf Siebel. please.
Rudolf Siebel, BVI, I withdraw because you just mentioned LEI will be mentioned later. I was asking where LEI fits into metadata, sorry.
Yes, we will come to that.
Any other questions? Or should we move forward? I don't see any hands, so please, Anna, go ahead.
Thank you. So the next, the second mandate we'd like to discuss with you today is the automated validations. So the mandate we have is to specify how the collection bodies shall perform technical automated validation for information submitted by entities. So it's important to highlight that here we're dealing with technical automated validation. So we're not talking about validation of the authorizations. We're not dealing with manual validations of the information, manual checks. We're talking about something that machines can perform on an automated basis. And our approach is therefore consequent to our mandate, because since validations do not concern the content of the information, we deem it not necessary to specify how validations need to be performed for each type of information separately. So in a way, we propose to keep this at principle based and establish some principles on the basis of which collection bodies shall validate. Of course, there will be additional level 3 guidance on collection bodies on how to perform validations, especially since ESMA itself will be performing validations on the information. But we don't think it is necessary to include the detail of the validation, the automated validations to be performed in level 2 legislation. So the validations in terms of principle, what we think should be validated is if the information has been submitted in the expected format, so in a data extractable format, or where required under sectoral legislation in a machine readable format, that the metadata of the information submitted is available, complete and consistent, and that the qualified electronic seal where required, and bear with me, we will talk about qualified electronic seal later, is present, compliant, and has the expected characteristics, including being valid at the time of submission and not modified since. We are also proposing that a standardized format for feedback messages from collection bodies should be developed, and we are proposing that feedback message to be in ISO 20022 XML format. And I will pause here to see if there's any comments or reactions to the slide. Maybe.
I don't see any hands. What about on chat? Is there any questions relating to this?
I see one question that may be related slightly to, I'll try to take it. And as I said, John, we'll handle your question later on. Once a corporation has submitted to ESAP, who has the responsibility for any issues which might arise with respect to the data integrity as a result of the collection of the data and or ESAP's process for publication? So I understand the interest of this question. This is obviously a very relevant question. It is not, strictly speaking, the topic of the consultation, and we have not, I do not have an answer that's been thoroughly discussed with our legal service. I would say for sure, if data is corrupted after it has been submitted by the entity, this will not be the legal responsibility of the entity. As for detailed responsibility between collection bodies and ESAP, allow me not to give an answer now, as these are very delicate legal questions that will need to be discussed between ESMA and the collection bodies at a later stage.
I don't see any hands, so we could move forward, please. There's one, so coming back. So Ulf Herbig.
Yes, hello, thanks. This is Ulf Herbig from Kneip. My question would be regarding the validation controls, where NCAs have published themselves certain rules, error codes, messages for the submission of information. Would the ESAP adopt them and therefore take them into consideration like for like? or do you plan to deviate from them or even add additional controls on top?
I would like to turn the question around, and I would suggest that the expected process is that ESMA coordinates the checks that will be performed at national level, and of course we cannot prevent collection bodies from applying additional ones. But I would not expect ESMA to do additional. I would not expect ESMA to do fewer or different ones compared to collection bodies, as we will be. We aim to coordinate that process, and of course, if information has been accepted by a collection body, it will be undesirable that it is then rejected by ESMA. We are conscious that that would be an undesirable process, and we will do everything that's in our power to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we can move on.
Yes.
So this slide is about the characteristics of the qualified electronic seal. This is an area where, compared to the Commission proposals, there have been very significant changes, because the qualified electronic seal is no longer mandatory for all data flows. In fact, in the final level 1 text, the qualified electronic seal is mandatory only if allowed by the member state and thereafter mandated by the collection body. And we don't have, so there is currently no certainty over which member state may allow it and which collection body is mandated, especially because collection bodies have not been designated yet. But I would suggest this, at least at the beginning, this will be a residual number of entities, of collection bodies mandating this, very few. So someone is not muted. You mute all and then we unmute. Okay. We have taken an executive decision to mute everyone and then unmute ourselves. So this is just to say we have a mandate to specify the characteristics of the qualified electronic seal. So we are specifying those characteristics, but please keep in mind that the requirements have changed. So there has to be a proactive decision by the member state and by the collection body to mandate it. And obviously this will become known at a later stage. But the information we have is that few member states and collection bodies at the moment are considering this, considering to impose this. So our approach when it comes to the qualified electronic seal is extremely aligned, or aims to be as aligned as possible to Commission implementing decision 2015-1506, which indicates which are the baseline profiles recognized under the EIDAS in all member states. That is the XADES, CADES, and PADES baseline profile. We also suggest that a qualified electronic seal shall be a conformance level long term, because information will normally be stored on ESAP for 10 years. Therefore, that is it was consistent with the time of storage of information under ESAP. That's one suggestion we're very keen to hear your feedback on, because what's indicated in the last bullet currently is an optional feature of the qualified electronic seal. And we would like instead to mandate the use of the LEI to identify the organization using the seal in the qualified electronic seal. So let me say this again. The LEI is currently one of the optional attributes specified under EIDAS. And I see some hands clapping. Thank you. I suspect that means support. And we are proposing it to be mandatory. And we will see later on that, in fact, all organization, all legal persons reporting under ESAP are expected to have an LEI. Therefore, we think this will not pose a problem in practice for reporting entities. But please, if you have views on this, make sure you submit your feedback, as this is one of the areas in which we can exercise discretion. Other than the support showed with your clapping hands, anyone has any questions or comments, please?
No hands, so full support.
Very good, thank you. So open standard licenses. This is another mandate we have to specify the open standard licenses to be applied by collection bodies. So the main objective of ESAP being that information should be made publicly accessible. What we are proposing is just cascading from the main objective of ESAP. Since the role of collection bodies is to collect information from entities that are under an obligation to make information available to the public, we assume that information, that the purpose of the legislation is to make the information as usable and reusable as possible. For that reason, we think that the most permissive open standard licenses should be adopted. On the basis of commission previous work, we have identified the Creative Commons public domain dedication as an appropriate open standard license, and we would recommend the use of Creative Commons public domain dedication CC0 or any equivalent open license to apply on collection bodies. That means that collection bodies will not be able to apply additional limitations on the use of the data they will receive from reporting entities, and users will be able to copy, modify, distribute, perform the work, even for commercial purposes, without asking permission to the collection body. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, in response to the comments one of you in the audience, this doesn't apply to IP rights and nor to other rights that may pertain to the preparer of the information. So this applies to the collection body and what collection bodies may or may not do. And what we're saying here is that collection bodies may not in any way restrict data users from making use of the data they make available to ESAP. And I'll pause here and see if any reactions. Some support. Thank you.
So Rudolf, please, and thank you for your support so far.
Yeah, Rudolf Siebel, BVI, German Fund Managers Association. We have been a long-standing supporter of the LEI system. And I mentioned this in this context because the LEI is an international global private-public partnership. And if you look on their website, they also use the COO license for the distribution of legal entity information. So we fully support ESAP using the same kind of license system, which to date seems to have been working well in practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then there's Stephanie Verida.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you very much for that. I'm also working with FIBIS, the Federation of Business Information Services. So just a quick question regarding database rights, because I understand from your slide that the CC0 would not take into account IP rights from the preparers. But there may have been some questions regarding collection bodies and the database rights that they can hold on the information. So do you also confirm that there's not going to be any database rights triggering by the collection bodies and the national bodies gathering the information? Thank you very much.
So I'm checking if our legal expert is on the line. There is some provision. So this stems directly from level 1, where database rights are discussed. I wanted to retrieve the exact wording. Second. So this is in article, is directly handled in Article 5 of the ESAP regulation, where it says, as regard paragraph 7, as regards the information within the scope of this regulation, the collection bodies shall not exercise the right of the maker of a database referred to in Article 7.1 of Directive 96/9/EC of the European Parliament and Council, or any other intellectual property rights in a way that prevents or restricts the use and reuse of the contents of the database pursuant to Article 9 of this regulation. Because this is beyond the scope of our own work. This is already dealt with by level 1.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't see any more hands. What about the chat? Is there any questions?
There's some support.
Okay,
No question.
Okay, good. So maybe we could continue.
Okay, moving on. We're dealing with data collection API. So the API that's going to be between the collection bodies and ESAP. It's important to make this to specify this because, as I mentioned earlier, we have another API, which is the one that ESAP will make available to end users to consume the information. This is something different. This is about how ESAP will collect information from collection bodies. And here we have a mandate to specify the characteristics of the API to be implemented by collection bodies, and through which collection bodies shall provide ESMA with the information, the metadata for that information, and where relevant, the qualified electronic seal. So in this regards, our proposed approach is obviously to provide high-level principles rather than describe the technical characteristics of the API. And they would be in our proposal as follows. The collection body shall send the new or updated data to ESAP via file transfer and receive feedback on their submission. So that means we do not plan to go fetch the data via ESAP, but we expect collection bodies to send us the information via file transfer. We expect to support at least the formats of information specified in the ITSs, and we will discuss in later slides what is the proposed formats which we intend to allow for the information. And we would support at least the formats of the metadata specified also in the ITSs, on which we've already discussed. If you remember, that is ISO 20022 XML or the machine readable format in which the information is submitted. The API shall rely on widely adopted and secure internet protocols to exchange data via the transfer of files. We should also be able to, the API should also enable ESMA to implement access control procedure for the purpose of collecting data from relevant entities. This is obviously because the ESAP system, as we discussed, is a two-tier system. Collection bodies need to be designated either by member states or are already defined in level 1. Therefore, we want to be able to ensure that we will collect data only from entities from which we want to collect data, and not everyone can just send us information as they please. Last but not least, the proposal is that updates or modifications of the API will be governed by ESMA's governance. This is quite straightforward and is linked to the fact that ESMA will be running the ESA platform. Therefore, it will be for ESMA's governance to propose updates and modifications. To pause here to see if any reaction.
Okay, one, yes, Andoni?
I think I was unmuted. I have a question regarding the collection bodies. These are only the NCAs or also the private sector? Who has to provide this information to the ESAP?
So this is also, thank you for your question. I think this doesn't pertain strictly the consultation paper, but I think it's a relevant question that others may also be curious about. So the collection bodies are defined by level 1. If you look at the Omnibus Directive and Regulation, to which, by the way, we are providing links in the slide deck that you will receive after this meeting. The Omnibus Directive and Regulation amend each regulation which is in scope of ESAP and indicates for each type of information what is the collection body. In some cases, the collection body is already defined. Normally, that is the NCA. There is the official appointed mechanism. In very limited cases, it's the public registry, or it may be one of the ESAs, so EBA, ESMA, or EIOPA. In other cases, the collection body must be designated by the member state. So there is discretionality for member states to decide who is nominated as a collection body. We do not have visibility as of today as to who will be nominated for the various data flows. And there is the level 1 also defines the latest time by when member state may make that decision. And therefore, it's not expected that we know already today. Also, something that might be of interest to you is that members collection bodies which are already nominated may also decide to delegate some of their tasks to other bodies. And that's also something we currently do not have a clear picture of. This is still under development. But so there is some activity that will happen following now the entrance into force of ESAP in nomination of additional collection bodies and potentially in delegation of some of the tasks to third parties. We do not know, therefore, as of today, if any private sector body will be nominated as collection body or will be delegated some activities by existing collection bodies. I hope that provides you an answer.
Yes, thank you very much.
I don't see any other questions. So maybe we could continue.
Okay. So the next mandate you'd like to discuss is time limits. And with this mandate, we are required to specify by when collection body shall provide ESMA with the information, the metadata for that information, and when relevant, the qualified electronic seal. The way we've understood this mandate is so by when, as mentioned, by when collection bodies shall provide information to ESMA. And our ambition, the point for us to develop this mandate is to limit the delay between when the information is made public by collection bodies and when the same information is available on ESAP. The idea being that we don't want information to be made available at national level much earlier than on ESAP, if we want ESAP to be a useful tool for end users, investors, data analysts, and so forth. We also start from the assumption, however, that it will not be necessary for ESAP to make information available immediately after reporting entities make it available to the public, because we are also aware that collection bodies themselves will not necessarily receive it immediately when it is made available to the public. There may be press conferences, there may be investors event where information is made available first. So we deem that 1 hour is a sufficient timeline between when collection bodies make information available to the public at their level and when they submit it to ESAP. That 1 hour should be considered as a maximum delay and not as the rule. So it will be on a best effort basis, but no later than 1 hour after collection bodies have made it public at their level. We're also trying to cater for situations where there is manual validations of information. For example, prospectuses. Prospectuses are sent to NCAs. NCAs have got set time period to approve that prospectus, and only after it has been approved, they make it available to the public. Therefore, the wording we've tried to use in the ITSs is to make sure that the information is sent to ESAP as soon as possible after it is made, after that information which has been manually validated is also made available to the public. And at any rate, no later than an hour after it's been published at national level. And I'll pause here to see any comments.
Yes, there's a hands raising. So Maria Teresa.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hi. Thank you for the opportunity. So I have a question on the time limits. Regarding this, shouldn't a certain high percentage of API and database access be guaranteed for higher users? For example, I think for at least 98% or another threshold if the time limit is fixed at 60 minutes. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the connection between the time limits and the availability. Do you mind expanding on this a bit further for us to be able to provide the best answer possible?
Yeah, I mean, for example, if, for example, also in the ESAP, in the regulation, the legislators say that ESAP is accessible for at least 97% of time per month. So how this can work with the 60 minutes deadline for submit the information and be the information available for the users? For example.
Okay, I understand. I think we're touching on two slightly different aspects, because indeed, as you correctly say, Article 11 says that ESAP is to be accessible for 97% of the time per month, but that is accessibility by end users. So that's when a user needs to be able to go on ESAP and download the information it is looking for. The time limits we're dealing with here are the time when collection bodies should send information to ESAP. So it's the provision of the information to the platform. This is not about users accessing the platform. So I can see that this can create confusion, but it's two very different periods of time. And
okay,
I don't
perfect.
see, personally, I don't see a conflict, but
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Now it's clearer.
Okay, thank you.
Then John Turner, please.
Thanks very much. I wonder whether you could expand on the policy thinking in this area. And I understand entirely the difference between a situation in which there might have been a press release distributed or a press conference held, that information then going to an NCA or other collecting body and then being passed to ESAP. But I'm wondering what this means in practical terms for market use of information if there is a delay for information that is merely provided to the NCA or collecting body and then goes to ESAP. If there's a 60-minute delay, then that will mean that data providers and significant users of that information will need two forms of data feed. They'll need to be able to acquire that information from ESAP as in the general course, and they will need, in order to ensure that they are up to date, to have separate connections to all of those collecting bodies. Is that really the policy consideration? Because that seems like a bit of an issue. Thank you, John. I understand your point, and I'll try to explain this. And just to highlight, this is a proposal, and we're very happy to hear feedback, especially from users. But our policy assumption here is that ESAP will not be the reference point for time-sensitive information. So this is what we're discussing in the consultation paper, that our assumption is that users who are looking to make an investment decision as fast as possible, as soon as profit release is made available, will not be making reference to ESAP, but will rather look at the press conference, will look at the investors event, will not be necessarily looking for that information at the collection bodies level or at ESAP level. And this is also because the scope of ESAP is very, very broad and doesn't pertain only, to be honest, the information, the annual, I assume what you're given, we know each other from other work experiences, but annual financial reports are only a tiny part of the disclosures which will be in the scope of ESAP. Therefore, we think that a rule should apply to all legislative frameworks. And for that reason, since we don't expect ESAP to be the reference point for time-sensitive information, we think that it's reasonable to allow collection bodies an hour before sending this information on at ESAP level. Because ESAP will be mainly a repository of not just of historical information, but of information that has been already made available to the public and that can be consulted at any time during for an investment decision. But very happy to hear your feedback if you think that an hour is excessive. What we try to do is to strike the right balance between ensuring information at EU level as soon as possible without causing excessive burden on collection bodies, because obviously immediate transmission of information to ESAP will be extremely challenging from a technical perspective. And unless we have a case to say that this is strictly necessary, meaning unless you think that ESAP will become the reference point for all investors to look at time-sensitive information, it will be unnecessarily burdensome. John, have I responded to your question? Does this seem... You have, Anna. Thanks for the clarification. And let us go and think about that and indeed talk to more users. Sure. This is one area in which users' input will be extremely helpful. So thank you. And if possible for you to reach out also to additional users beyond this audience, please don't hesitate.
Thank you. And now I don't see any more hands. So maybe we could move forward. Now there's one. So Lucia.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I put a question in the chat, but it seems you didn't see it. My question was regarding the time frame. You indicated in 1 hour, no later than 1 hour, and as soon as possible. And this is on an effort basis. How do you ensure this enforceability? For example, if there is a delay, do you provide any sanction or penalties about that? Thank you.
There's no sanctions or penalties foreseen at the moment. That being said, since this will be enshrined in EU law, collection bodies that are late will be infringing their legal obligations. And there are tools which the European Commission and ESMA can mobilize to tackle this. Obviously, if this becomes systematic, we're not talking about the odd incident in which information is submitted late. But this is a legal obligation that will be established, and therefore, and also collection bodies we would not expect such a broad variety of collection bodies. We expect most of the collection bodies to be NCAs, OEMs, and bodies with whom we hope to establish good working relationships, and they're not supervised entities as such. So we hope to be able to work in good faith and trying to deliver on our respective obligations.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you. And no, I don't see more hands, so please.
Okay, thank you. In this slide, we're presenting our approach with regards to the list and characteristics of acceptable formats, which is another mandate we can work on. Our proposal is that all the formats which are currently used for reporting information under the scope of ESAP, and which may be mandated in the future in legislation under the scope of ESAP, should be accepted. So we're trying to take as much a present and future-proof approach as possible. So what we are proposing as indicatively acceptable as machine readable are XML, JSON, XBRL, XBRL CSV, and inline XBRL, whilst the formats falling under the definition of data extractable are PDF and XHTML. So what we're trying to do is to look at what's currently being reported, ensure it is included, but also include a provision that says that additional machine-readable data extractable formats mandated by legislation will also be acceptable under ESAP. We would be very interested to know from reporting entities whether there is additional formats they deem should fall under either category, We are very open to listen to your feedback on this, and whether you agree with our classification of what is machine readable and data extractable, making sure, but keeping in mind that those definitions are also set by EU legislation. In the open data directives, you can find the exact definitions in the consultation paper. But so provided that they fall under the definitions, we are happy also to consider other formats reporting entities or users might be willing us to consider. Floor to questions, if any. Okay, there's a comment from John. Turner suggests adding XBRL JSON to the list. Happy to consider it, though I'm not sure any of the information is currently reporting under XBRL JSON, but we will take that into consideration. Please don't hesitate to submit that as part of your response to the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, and there are no hands, so maybe moving. Yes.
And I also know that there is some support from other stakeholders participating in today's conversation to John Turner's comment. Okay, so moving on to the next section of today's open hearing. We're going to move on to Article 7 of the ESAP regulation. So this is it's no longer about the tasks of the collection bodies, but rather the functionalities of ESAP. So this is probably more impactful for users directly, as we are talking about the features that ESAP will have to offer to the end users accessing the platform. So first of all, we look at data publication API. So here our mandate is to specify the characteristics of the API that will be made available to end users. So we're talking about the API between ESAP and the investors, the analysts, the end users at large. Here, the characteristics we suggested to define is that API should be made available to the public in full to ensure transparency and to enable the broadest possible level of data accessibility. We will enable, the API should enable a search and a download function. Data should be distributed in the same format in which the information has been received. And just like in the other API, we propose that updates and modifications of the API should be governed by ESMA's governance. Again, because ESMA will be managing the ESAP platform. So this is quite short. I'll take a break to see if any comments or questions.
I see Michel.
Hi, thank you very much. Michele from Cervet. Would like to know if will be available API for searching by metadata or also by general search.
We will define the characteristics of the API also at the time of the implementation, seeing what will be possible. But at this stage, we plan indeed to support an API for search. For now, both on metadata and with keywords, it's still to be confirmed.
Thank you very much.
And then I have Rudolf Siebel, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that we are trying to use the existing European ratings platform as much as possible, and we would just reiterate that the ESAP should not make the mistakes which we see there and which have been documented in an ESMA final opinion at the end of 2018, namely that the user needs to identify himself as a human person. So machine scraping should be possible for the ESAP, and also coming back to some of the questions towards IP and databasing rights, unclear intellectual property disclaimers as existing on the ERP should be also avoided. We hope that that could be addressed through the COO license, which we have already discussed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We will do everything that's legally possible for ESMA to make sure that information is as broadly available as possible. We have constraints on certain data, as mentioned, IP rights. So I would not classify that as a mistake, but rather as legal obligations in certain instances. The scope of information here being very broad, for sure. The ambition is to make that information available as available as possible. Thank you for your comment. Maybe just a quick reaction to Michele's comment earlier. Please don't hesitate to submit your comments if you'd like to see more characteristics of the API defined in level 1, specified already in legislation. That's something we are also open to consider if deemed useful or relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good point. I don't see any hands raised, so Anna, please move on.
Okay, thank you. Next mandate is to specify the legal entity identifier of entities that submit the information and or of the legal person to which the information relates. Our approach here is rather straightforward. We think the legal entity identifier of entities should be the ISO 17442 LEI code. ESMA has a long history of using the LEI code, and it has been proven very successful in certain reporting frameworks. So that's what we intend to mandate in terms of legal entity identifier. One aspect that I'd like to make sure it's clear is that the obligation to obtain an LEI stems from the Omnibus Directive and Regulation. In certain instances, the LEI should be disclosed, should be provided when available. The way we understand this mandate is that the LEI is only not available for natural persons. For legal persons, the LEI is always available. It's a matter of obtaining it, and it can be obtainable at a very limited cost. And it is a necessary condition for entities to be findable on ESAP. It is the hook through which we can ensure that information is that the right entities is found when it's looked for, and therefore we reiterate through this mandate our strong support for the LEI and for the work performed by Glyph. I saw some hands with clapping support. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Bruno Stiebel, please.
Yeah, we have already spoken about IIDA certificates also. If you're using the LEI, you should be in perspective also thinking about using the VLEI to be able that document source quality can be verified. Thank you.
So under the ESAP framework, the tool mandated to ensure authenticity of information is the qualified electronic seal. And there is discussion ongoing on the basis of work carried out by EBA as to whether the VLEI can be considered a qualified electronic seal. So depending on how those discussions proceed, and provided that that qualified electronic seal is allowed by the member state and mandated by the collection body, as discussed earlier, that is one of the possible ways in which information may be authenticated on ESAP. But that is dependent on whether the VLEI will be recognized as a qualified electronic seal.
Then I have Sarah Schroeder, please.
Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you. I was just wondering how you can force entities to obtain the LEI if they don't want to. For example, in transaction reporting, you can always say, okay, no lie, no trade. But how can you do this here? Well, what would be the basis? Would the collection bodies, I mean, yeah, they have to take the information, but if the entity doesn't have a lie and doesn't want to obtain a lie, how would you do that? The answer is quite straightforward, and it comes from level 1 legislation, which says that entities submitting information to ESAP shall ensure that they shall obtain an LEI. So, for example, I see a question. I see a question also in the comment in the chat, specifying. And maybe I'll share my screen briefly, if you don't mind, because I'd like to show the exact provision. So this is the Omnibus Directive I'm showing. This is the amendment to the Accounting Directive brought by the ESAP Omnibus Directive. So amendment to Directive 2013-34. I suspect the Commission Publication Office has not yet integrated this in the EU official journal, but it's legally already applicable. And this is going to be bringing in an article called Article 33A, which says that for the purpose of paragraph 1.b2, member states shall ensure that undertakings obtain a legal entity identifier. So there is an obligation established by level 1, which member states, in this case, because this being a directive, will have to transpose into national law. In other pieces of legislation, when there is a regulation, it's directly applicable, that mandates reporting entities to obtain a legal entity identifier. So in the case of ESAP, no LEI, no submission to ESAP. This is a requirement for stemming from level 1. Therefore, all legal persons shall obtain an LEI. And that you should see.
Thank you. That was really clear. I don't see any more hands. So maybe we could continue.
There is just a comment in the chat I'd like to react on, Army, if you don't mind. It says that one more point is from John Turner. It would be helpful if the ESAP framework obliges not only use of the LEI, but that the LEIs are renewed at least annually. Otherwise, there's a risk that this information will quickly go stale. Thank you for that comment, John. Indeed, that's what we have proposed in the ITS is that the LEI should be duly renewed. It should be valid and duly renewed. So we hope that caters for your comment. If not, as always, please do submit comments to the consultation paper. And there's a hand up.
Yeah, John wanted to react, so please.
I merely wanted to applaud that. Thank you very much. That's great. That's the required missing piece of that LEI puzzle, and from our perspective, that's terrific to hear.
Thank you, John. There's another question in the chat from Alain Ducasse that I maybe take. The question is, do you mean that part of the automated checks performed by collection bodies is to check the validity of LEIs? We will definitely be checking the validity of LEIs. The question from Ignacio, the LEI is not for free. May the LEI mandatory is not increasing regulatory burden. The LEI, there is plenty of research showing that the cost of an LEI is very limited. We're talking few tens of euros per year. And it may be a very slightly increasing regulatory burden, but that's already enshrined in EU law. Second, we think that companies trading on EU capital markets may well afford 50 euros a year. for obtaining an LEI. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to remind the fact that the LEI comes at a very limited cost for companies. Thank you, Ignacio.
Good, I don't see more hands. And is there any comment on the chat?
No further comments. Maybe we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so next item on our list is the classification of the types of information. So this at first may look like a very technical mandate, so just providing a list of the types of information that are in the scope of ESAP. In fact, as always, the devil is in the detail, because we are listing each disclosure obligation as a different type of information. You will see, as I mentioned earlier, the full list of type of information in the annex to the ITSs. Where, however, it would be very relevant for us to get your feedback is what kind of type of information should we derive from single documents which respond to several legal obligations. And I think the most glaring example comes from phase one, where, for example, under the Transparency Directive, an annual financial report actually responds to various obligations. So an annual financial report contains the annual financial statements. So the financial statements, the audit report, in the very imminently the sustainability report. So our proposal in the consultation paper is that whenever a reporting entity submits a annual financial report, it should accompany it with tags with metadata indicating all the types of information to which that information contains. And the objective of this, the policy reasoning, is that a user searching for a sustainability report may not know whether that sustainability report is embedded in an annual financial report, or whether it's submitted as a separate document as it is allowed under certain national legislation. Therefore, by saying that all annual financial report must be accompanied by also the sustainability information tag, whenever they contain sustainability information, ensures that a search for sustainability information will also result in an annual financial report containing that information, and not just a standalone document and not just the standalone documents which come under that name. So this is a proposal. It will require a little bit more effort, obviously, than just saying that an annual financial report is an annual financial report, but keeping in mind that the main objective of ESAP is to facilitate accessibility of information and ensure that users can easily search through the information, and taking into account that we are dealing with a constituency composed of many member states where national laws create some divergence in the way in which information is submitted. We think this is the most user-friendly way to approach this mandate. Please don't hesitate to take the floor now, or let us know in the course of the consultation whether you agree with this proposal or if you have any alternatives to suggest. Any questions? There's one sign of support in the chat. Many thanks. And another one now.
Thumbs up. Yes, good. So positive reaction so far. Okay, I don't see any hands. What about the chat?
So there's one question in the chat. How will that work with different documents that may contain the same or similar information? Will it show every single example? For example, juror listers. I am not 100% sure I understand. So if different documents contain the same or similar information. So dual listers means that the same company submits the same information to different, for example, for different OEMs. Is that okay? Thomas is raising his hand. Maybe he can elaborate.
Yeah. So when you have
certain companies that might be listed in multiple jurisdictions, and so they will be submitting information that is attaching to their LEI, but will be under different mandates, and so they would have the tagged information that is the same set, effectively is the same set of information, but might have some local jurisdictional aspects that attach to it. So would it show every version that has been filed across the EU, or would it just provide a single version? It will provide every version submitted in the EU. What may be helpful, though, to clarify is that ESAP, at least until 2030, will not accept voluntary information. So whenever that information is submitted on a voluntary basis, at least until 2030, and possibly thereafter, if it's of limited value to investors, ESAP will not contain it. But if an issuer is submitted to the obligation to submit to several member states the same set of information, ESAP will normally contain both sets of information indeed. And by the way, there's very little we can do about that, because if this corresponds to the fact that there is separate disclosure obligations on the same reporting entity. So it's not within our remits to remove any information from ESAP.
I have one comment from Pierre, so please.
Yes, sorry, I have some problems with my keyboard, so difficult to type something, sorry. Does that mean that you need to work on the metadata in order to describe all the regulations that could be applying to a given document or report?
I'm not sure the term is could be applied. Normally, the obligation is, a company will be preparing information to discharge its obligation pursuant to a certain regulation. And we would assume that the preparer of the information is aware or can easily find out pursuant to what obligation that information is being submitted. And indeed, we expect that the reporting entity will be indicating to which type of information the information being disclosed is prepared pursuant to. However, let me also add, this is the types of information that we are suggesting ESAP should be make accessible to users. This does not mean that collection bodies necessarily need to collect this information if they already have it. So there's different ways in which collection bodies already know what is the types of information, or may already know what are the types of information for each document that is submitted to them. For example, the prospectus, if I'm thinking of the ESMA's prospectus register, NCAs currently have processes to collect prospectuses from reporting entities. And I suspect it may not be necessary, or rather, this is beyond the scope of ESMA's work, but I suspect that collection bodies, in this case, the NCAs, will know through the platform from which they are gathering that information, from which they're collecting that information information is a prospectus. So they can devise automated systems to add a tag saying that information is a prospectus. It will depend on how collection bodies define their systems. This is, as I said, is beyond our purpose. What we are trying to do here is to define how the information has to be classified when it gets to ESAP, not necessarily when it gets to the collection body. So there's different ways in which collection bodies can then find out what are the types of information applicable to each piece of each piece of document.
Yes, my understanding is that you will be working at the level of document and not its content, which basically means that you can have the same content in different documents. And basically all the tags and the metadata are going to be related to one given document.
and all its content at the same time. Am I correct? So basically it means that, for example, for fund, I may have a prospectus and key information documentation. For the KID, I have one set of data. For the prospectus, I have one set of data. Some data points may be the same between the two documents, but all the work that is going to be done at the ESAP level is going to be at the level of document. Am I correct? Yes, that's, if I understand your question, I would agree with what you've just said, yes. Okay, thank you very much. And that is because physically, what's being submitted to ESAP is a document. We are not going to be collecting individual data points. We're collecting physical documents. And that's why this is okay, so this applies also when we were talking about timing, for example. If one given information is making public, but it's only part of a document, the 1 hour that we were talking about does not apply. It shall apply only when the full information contained in one document is available and validated. So I'm not sure, unless you're a collection body, that time limit will not apply to you at all. For reporting entities, the current obligations will continue to apply in terms of timeline for submitting the information. So you are subject to certain obligations to submit that information to your NCA or to make that information available to the public on your website. Those timelines will continue to apply and will correspond to the time in which you submit information to the collection body. The mandate we have to specify time limits only applies to collection bodies reporting information to ESAP, not to reporting entities themselves. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any new comments in the chat?
There's one question from Ignacio Boisho about sending the same disclosure in different languages. Here the answer again the only answer is about whether that document is being disclosed pursuant to an obligation to disclose different languages, or whether it is a voluntary submission. This is something we have not fully discussed with NCAs, but a preliminary view would be that if information is made available to a collection body in different languages pursuant to an obligation, then both versions of the same document will be available on ESAP. So we will, and anyways, ESAP will also provide an automated translation service. Therefore, if we are able to rely on the original version translated by the reporting entity itself, it's likely that will ensure the quality, the highest possible quality of the translation. So that's something we would not discourage. Armi, there is an interesting question in the chat, which is not specifically on types of information, but I'd like to take because there may not be a specific opportunity otherwise. So the question is, it would be useful for investors to have access to available historical data. How ESAP is facing comparability of historical information, financial and non-financial information. So here it's a very interesting question in my view, and the ESAP regulation already provides for what is going to be possible or not possible in terms of historical information. And I think it will become, it's also the approach taken by the co-legislators also stems from the fact that for information to be findable on ESAP, it has to be accompanied by a set of metadata. Therefore, it would be unduly burdensome to ask reporting entities to go back to historical information, add additional metadata in order for historical information to be made available on ESAP. What the regulation says is that collection bodies, which are union bodies, may make available to ESAP historical information. And therefore, reporting entities will not be solicited to do that, it will be a choice of the collection body at no cost to the reporting entity. So the only types of historical information you may find on ESAP, and it's a may, so we are yet to assess whether that will be practicable from the collection body perspective, is information which collection bodies choose on a voluntary basis to enrich with the relevant metadata and make available to ESAP. It will not be, by default, not all historical information today contained, for example, in an OEM database, that will not be available on ESAP because of the complexity of enriching it with the metadata, and that's the rationale behind the co-legislator's decision. And maybe we can move on, and we will handle further questions in the open Q&A if we have any time left. Okay, on size of entities. Here the mandate is to specify the size by category of the entities that submitted the information and to which the information relates. So here it's important to take a step back and think of what the co-legislators have thought for ESAP, and what the platform will look like when it comes to searching by size. So the co-legislators have made a conscious choice of mandating only certain entities to disclose size in the Omnibus Directive and regulation. So we don't think on the basis of the level 1 that ESAP should attempt to create a harmonized approach across all entities, because that would not be in line with our mandate, and also it would not be practicable because there are very good reasons why entities are classified by size only on the basis of in comparison to similar entities. So if we cannot have one cross-cutting category of large, small, and medium-sized entities by trying to compare CRAs and banks, because all CRAs would end up being small and all banks would end up being big. So how we have interpreted this mandate is that we should specify what is the size for those entities for which the co-legislators have asked us to have to propose a metadata search on the basis of size. And we intend to base it only on existing level 1 sectoral legislation. Some of the existing categories by size in level 1 are actually not usable because the category small is itself used in order to ensure that, in order to discharge certain entities from a disclosure obligation. So small entities do not have a disclosure obligation. Therefore, using that category by size is not, it would not be useful. In the consultation, we're also proposing that there is no category by size in level 1, and there is still a requirement to disclose the size on the basis of the omnibus. The metadata to indicate all sizes should be applied. So as you see, our approach is to minimize changes, minimize complexity, only use size whenever level 1 already defines what is the size. We make reference to that level 1 in the ITSs, and size should be disclosed only when it's mandated by the Omnibus Directive or regulation. And I realize that may be a lot to take in. I take a pause to see if there's any questions or comments.
I don't see any hands, but more positive reactions on thumbs up. Yes, good. Maybe we should move forward.
Okay. Moving on, we have industry sectors, whereby we should specify the characterization of industry sectors to allow for search on the basis of a corresponding metadata. And here our approach is that is twofold. For non-financials, we propose to use the NACE code. For financial entities instead, for which the NACE code would probably be too high level, we propose a list of relevant industry sectors for ESAP, similarly to what we've done in EMIR or DORA. So you can make reference, you can look in the consultation paper at the list of industry sectors we propose for financial entities. Those are listed in the consultation paper in paragraph 130. And we will be welcoming your feedback to know whether more or fewer categories are relevant to be added within for that categorization. As for the NACE code, I would hope is rather uncontroversial, but it's a very widespread classification system used in other EU legislations as well, most notably the taxonomy regulation. And but happy to have your feedback also on that.
Dominic, Elk, please.
Yeah, hello from Frankfurt, Germany. I come from the Deutsche Bundesbank, and I have a question on the sectors. I was raised it already, I think, in a comment field. I'm an expert on financial statements, on non-financial entities, and also involved with a lot of sector classification. So there, when you come to reporting financial statements, you have two different obligations. You have the annual financial statements and also the consolidated financial statements. And both are provided by usually by a legal entity. So the NACE sector code is usually a statistical determination of a legal entity. But when you talk about financial statements and consolidated financial statements, the perspective is different. The one is the group and the other one is the legal entity. And if you have, for example, a holding company, that might be different. So you have a lot of holding companies that are somewhere classified in, I think it's in letter M now at the current classification. But if you talk about consolidated financial statements, you have you are somewhere else in the non-financial area. For example, car makers is a big approach. So you might. So the question is, how do you approach this problem that there might be two different sectors depending on whether you have annual financial statements or consolidated financial statements? Thank you very much, and good luck for your long journey.
Our long journey. Thank you very much. So we are catering for that in the draft ITS by saying that more than one industry sector may be used. So we thought in particular in case of conglomerates, that more than one sectors may be indicated for one single entity. I think the question you're raising may also concern the fact that one same document may include individual financial statements and consolidated financial statements. And there the question would raise as to which industry sector should be reported. And there level one helps us because it says that this information should pertain to the entity to which the information refers. And in case of consolidated financial statements, it would be by far and large, it would be the submitting entity would be the consolidated entity. So, but this is something that is not specified in the ITS, it's very detailed. And if relevant, we will provide level 3 guidelines on how to approach this kind of issues. But if it is a consolidated entity submitting information, my preliminary view is that the industry sectors need to correspond to the consolidated entity and not just the individual financial statements. I hope, but that's not something we have we're necessarily dealing with in the ITS. It's very specific. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. There's two comments in the chat. One is do not use industry classifications which require licenses. Perfect. That's what we're doing. I hope that means you support our proposed approach. Indeed, NACE codes don't require licenses, and the list of industry sectors we are proposing is for financial entities is made by us, so no licensing either. There's also more a challenging question by Claire Elizabeth Fritz. saying, and I think it's rather on the size of entities, and it's asking the accounting directive includes some option for member states in particular, but not only on sizes of entities. How will these options be taken into account at ESAP level? So, and for this, I invite you to look at in detail at the drafting in the ITSs that we are proposing. In the ITSs, we are, in terms of when it comes to size only, we are proposing to use the sizes, the size kind of brackets specified in the accounting directly specifically. So not the national implementation and the national specificities, because our assumption being that if size for entities is defined in different ways in member states, and we're trying to compare them at EU level, using different thresholds would yield non-comparable results. So for the accounting directive, and I'm trying to, I don't have that at hand, but here it is. In the accounting directive, there is, for example, definitions for micro undertakings, which on the basis of threshold of criteria linked to balance sheet, total net turnover, and average number of employees. And those are the criteria we're suggesting to use for ESAP, not necessarily the national transposition and the adoption of options taken at national level. This is also something we are happy to hear your feedback on, but we think preliminarily that would be the approach that would yield the most coherent results for users when searching for information disclosed pursuant to the accounting directive. And there's another comment on NACE classifications. Level 1 is very generic. It would be helpful to us the level 2. Happy to consider it. Please don't hesitate to provide us that comment in a formal response to the consultation, and we will look into that if possible. Obviously, balancing it out with the additional cost that would come for reporting entities. So it's always we're looking for the right balance between cost for reporting entities and useful information for users. But please don't hesitate to provide us with your arguments on why it's helpful to you to have the level 2.
Good. I don't see any hands. So next steps.
Okay, so we're close to the end, and I will therefore take you through what's happening next. And also we have a small Q&A if you want to raise more questions, but in a nutshell, the consultation on the Joint Committee ITSs closes on 8th of March. Therefore, if you have any comments, also in light of the explanations provided today, please do submit a response in writing. We will be reading all of them and considering them very closely in the finalization of the draft ITSs. What happens next is that the Joint Committee will finalize the draft ITS on collection bodies and on ESAP functionalities. So that's the ITSs pursuant to Article 5 and Article 7. And our legal deadline for that is Q3 2024. This will be included in a final report, which also summarizes the responses received in the consultation, and also take into account the feedback received today at this open hearing, for which I truly want to thank you all for your participation and very active contributions. We will be submitting the draft ITSs to the European Commission around Q3 2024, and the European Commission will have 3 months for adopting them. And normally thereafter, if everything goes as planned, these ITSs will be published in the official journal of the EU and become applicable. And as mentioned by Armi in her introduction, will contribute to build the backbone of the ESAP system. In parallel, we are already launching our procurement process and the implementation of the initial capabilities of ESAP. Therefore, we're not waiting until the level 2 is fully final to get to work on the IT front. And we are working on that in parallel through an iterative method, therefore adjusting as we move forward and as the requirements become more and more set into stone. That being said, we have some time, we have 20 minutes left to the allocated time. So if there is any further questions or comments, please don't hesitate. The floor is yours.
Yes, there's Bodo Kesselmeyer. You are muted, so we cannot hear you.
Do you hear me? Hello?
We cannot hear you, so you are a bit away from the microphone, I think.
Okay. Sorry, I write it in the chat. I think the volume is very, very low.
Yeah.
Oh, now it's just muted.
Okay, maybe we can wait for him to make the amendments to the system, but maybe Vivek, Nanda, if you could now have your... Yes,
Sure,
okay, good.
Ami. I think one of the questions, and it is of course with a noble cause, is like we are facilitating a lot of languages because of the regional specificities of different countries within EU. But have you ever considered the ease of reporting, and from a ESAP perspective, that having a common language in terms of collection across the two-tier system that you have would really reduce the burden and complexity that from an ESAP dissemination perspective would do? And could it help, or there were some considerations why you're open to translations? Because in my experience, translations are not always perfect. So it could lead to information which could be incorrectly interpreted if the translation services are being provided at the tier 2 level.
So your question is whether we have considered further harmonizing the interface between the collection bodies and the reporting entities?
I think across the two tiers, I would say the obligation from the reporting entities towards the collection bodies as well as to ESAP, if it could be standardized, so it will reduce the complexity a lot, and standardizing that in terms of confusing the data or during the translation process would reduce a lot of data related issues.
Thank you. I think regardless of what we think or do not think, we are acting on the basis of a legal mandate that allows us to specify obligations of the collection bodies when reporting to ESAP, and it goes beyond our mandate to specify what reporting entities should do when reporting to collection bodies. So there may be some advantages, there may be some disadvantages, but all we can do is to use let's say our supervisory convergence powers in encouraging, raising awareness between different collection bodies, a lot of which will be NCAs, in the fact that harmonizing as much as possible the requirements maybe is helpful for reporting entities in certain circumstances. But at its core, this work is performed on the basis of a legal mandate given to us by the co-legislators, and those are the boundaries within which we can create a legal obligation on collection bodies. We don't have that mandate with regards to the first tier, as we call it now.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And now let's check whether we are able to hear you, Bodo.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Sorry for the problem. My name is Bodo Kesselmeyer. I'm representing the German analyst or German Society of Investment Professionals and the Commission of Company Analysis or Corporate Analysis. And I have a question considering your slide number 12, automated validation.
in the slide, it is stated that there is a mandate to specify how collection bodies shall perform technical automated validations for information submitted by entities. And my question is, does this mean that there is a legal possibility to prescribe that the collection bodies perform or technically enforce EU-wide standardized and uniform data validation? So, so my question is there a legal possibility to do that ESMA could do that? Background for that is that when structured information in the US has been mandated more than 10 years ago, they made the experience that data quality, or say minimum data quality, is really needed in order to get that the data are used. And they made, based on that experience, they introduced technical automated validation after years, and now the data is okay to be used. And I'm missing that in Europe, and therefore I ask if we have something in place that we can enforce, say, this EU-wide minimum data quality in order that the data we have really can be used in for investors and investment professionals. Thank you for the question. So we have a mandate to specify, to ensure that certain data quality aspects that can be automated shall be performed. So certain checks that can be automated on the basis of existing legal requirements can be should indeed be checked in a harmonized way. But I want to manage expectations in the sense that data quality often goes beyond the legal obligations. So when it comes to data quality, and I remember, if I'm not mistaken, your reference to the US speaks of the EDGAR submissions of inline XBRL reporting. I see a thumb up. There, in fact, the legal obligation, it's actually it's very high level. Data quality goes beyond legal obligation, and it's a matter of content enforcement, and it's a matter of much more complex than just a technical automated validation. So although we may be able to perform through ESAP some basic checks, so the correctness of the LEI, the fact that the package is the inline XBRL submission is packaged according to the RTS on ESAP, etc., we will not be able to enforce the quality of the tags or the correctness of the disclosures through technical automated validations. And I suspect the fact that that reporting framework in the US has been in place for 20 years plays a bigger role than the automated checks in the resulting data quality. So there is a long road to data quality, and it simply takes time and a lot of work by enforcers and reporting entities, and not just something a machine can automatically do. My question only relates to those automatic quality checks which a machine could do if we would allow a machine to do that. So not in excess of that. But at least that what could be done, and some of these checks are already integrated in some software and open source software. Yeah, I think I would like to differentiate between these two. Without wanting to go too technical into the one specific data flow, we are aware of the fact that a lot of the data quality checks that can be performed on annual financial reports in inline XBRL are actually warnings. So that's the issue. We can get a machine to issue warnings, but we cannot block a submission on the basis of a warning. There is no legal mandate to prevent information from being submitted to a regulator on the basis of something that may actually be justified. So that's the whole challenge with very complex reporting frameworks, such as the ESAP reporting framework. Anything that we can for where a clear line between correct and wrong submission can be drawn, that's where we can have a technical automated validation. Hard to say that on the basis of a warning we can reject. It would not. I don't think it would be desirable for us to reject a submission on the basis of something that may actually be justified.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you have raised a very important aspect on the quality of data, which is really important to all of us, and we are working hard on that. So trying to get very good data in to the supervisors and how to validate that with new subject programs as well. But now I have, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I try. So Daiva DDN, and apologies for not probably being correct.
Yes, hello everyone. Everything is fine. My name is Daiva. Currently, I'm representing audit company from Lithuania. Very nice to meet you, Anna. And here, actually, I have two questions. One is how many collection bodies per country can be? Is there any limits? Because otherwise, in my understanding, maybe it's not correct, but otherwise, if there is no limit, so there is no need to delegate functions. And another question about qualified electronic seals, and we were presented today, but in my understanding, I wanted to hear any new information about digital requirements to digital signatures, because are there any news? Because as I remember from that time when I was representing Enforcer, Bank of Lithuania, so companies were facing and we're still facing the problems with digital signatures. So are there any new requirements or any ideas how to solve this? Thanks a lot. Thank you, Daiva, for your questions. So I'll start with the first one, collection bodies. So just to recall what we said earlier, there's two different ways in which level 1 handles the nomination of a collection body. Either it is directly designated in level 1, and you can refer to the Omnibus Directive and Regulation to see when that is the case, or member states are in charge of designating a collection body. And there is no limitation to how many collection bodies may be designated. Just like there is no limitation to how many tasks, to the tasks that may be delegated to third parties by a collection body. So it's a very flexible framework that leaves discretion to member states. And as I mentioned earlier, we do not have visibility as of today of what the approach member states will take in these regards. We have to wait and see. So that's, I think, all I can say on collection bodies. With regards to digital signatures, I think, two different aspects. One, if we're talking about digital signatures mandated by ESAP, there is no longer digital signatures mandated by ESAP. I think you may recall this term from the Commission proposal, where it's talked about digital signatures or qualified electronic seal. In the final level 1 text, there is only a possibility, there is only a mention of qualified electronic seal. And as I said, it's a rather, it's not mandatory, and it's only if the member state first allows it and then the collection body mandates it. And it's only one of the ways in which collection bodies can ensure integrity of data. There is other ways in which the same outcome can be achieved, and therefore the legislation remains quite open. It says that collection bodies need to ensure authenticity and integrity of the data, but doesn't prescribe how that should be achieved. Obviously, this is notwithstanding the possibility that sectorial legislation may continue to evolve and digital signatures may be mandated on the basis of other work. So therefore, not on the basis of ESAP, but on the basis of sectorial legislation. There could be in the future a requirement to include digital signatures in documents. This is beyond the scope of today's consultation. Some work is being undertaken For example, we've been talking briefly about the VLEI by the European Banking Authority. Those are developments that ESAP will welcome and reflect, but not mandate. So this is not something we will do in the context of ESAP. I hope that answers your question, Daiva.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Then there's one hand. Miguel del Monaco, please.
Thank you very much. I would like just a confirmation. It's about data, my question. If a confirmation that ESAP will contain all financials from all companies in a given state, or only those companies that are listed in public, listed on a stock exchange or are related to the capital market? Thank you. Thank you, Michele. For that, I would invite you to look at the amendment to the accounting directive brought by ESAP. So you need to make reference to the Omnibus Directive and that section dealing with amending the accounting directive, where it specifies which are the entities which will have to submit information to ESAP, and pursuant to what articles of the accounting directive. So that is specified in that specific amendment. And the scope, just not to be too vague, the scope of the accounting directive, indeed, it's all undertakings. It's not just companies trading on regulated markets.
I have Dominic Elk.
Yeah, hello. I have one more question to the NARCO code, so the sector coding. You were in the consultation paper, sorry. You have that possibility for conglomerates to give a list of sectors. Depending on the conglomerate, that list could be very broad. So you could have, I don't know, A, C, G, H, something like that. Have you considered also to require a priority, so where the most importance of that conglomerate is? Otherwise, you might have let's see, an alphabetical order, and A would be not that much important. So would that be a concern not only for the searching function, but for the information provided by ESAP altogether? Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. That's a very relevant point, not one we're currently addressing in the draft ATS, and we'll be happy to see whether that's something we can handle via the requirements, or rather through additional guidance to propose to entities. But please don't hesitate to submit a comment in writing in the consultation. Otherwise, we'll try to retain that point and see how we can. If there is something we can do around that. I agree that we shouldn't have a conglomerate indicating 50 industry sectors. That would defeat the purpose.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very important point. And then I have Alfredo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Alfredo Maldonado. I work for the Banco de España, for Bank of Spain, and I have one last question regarding protection for the users of ESAP. Neither the collection bodies nor ESMA, as the body operating ESAP, would assume any liability for the accuracy of the information integrated in ESAP. As far as I am concerned, ESAP does not establish any kind of legal consequence in the event that entities fail to transmit accurate information. So how do you plan to give explicit protection for the users of ESAP against any potential loss or damage which may arise from their use of incorrect or incomplete information from ESAP? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfredo. I think it's relevant that we take a step back and think of what ESAP tries to achieve, and the fact that it doesn't come in a legal vacuum, but it comes against the background of very extensive regulation in the EU that attributes responsibilities to national competent authorities or European bodies for the enforcement and supervision and enforcement of compliance with existing regulations. So what ESAP tries to do is to facilitate accessibility of the existing information. It does not change responsibility for enforcement and supervision, which remains at EU or national level, depending on the legislative framework. The co-legislators, the outcome of the negotiations points to the fact that the responsibility when it comes to checking the content of the data stays with the entities that already today ensure that quality of data. And this will not change with ESAP. It's not part of the objectives of ESAP to change that process. But there are already measures that can be taken and are already taken by the respective enforcers to protect investors, to protect users of the data. And I really don't think that ESAP will make the situation any worse in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to make sure I don't have any more hands, but just to check whether there's any comments in chat that we should react on.
So there is a question from John on says, thank you for the clarity on Michele's question regarding private entities. So this means that ESAP will acquire CSRD filings from the non-listed entities covered by the Sustainability Reporting Directive. Will that mechanism provide the ESAs in due course a mechanism to oblige business registrars to collect that information in a digital format? Thank you for that very specific data CSRD related question. We have no visibility at the moment as to whether the ESAs will have a mechanism to oblige business registers to collect information. But what is clear is that the CSRD is coming into force this year. It will require digital reporting in due course, and it is the digital information that will be required from next year that ESAP aims to collect. And it would seem paradoxical if the same information was prepared in different formats for the purpose of different disclosure obligations. But that is there's no mechanism for the ESAs to require business registers to do anything in those regards.
Okay, I think that we have answered all the questions and comments, right? I'm looking at Anna. Yes, good. Good. So, and we are coming at the end of this meeting. First of all, I would like to thank you all for active participation to this meeting. And in case you have any questions or comments, so please go to the ESMA's website where there's this ad hoc form available for you to comment until 8th of March. And I would also like to thank especially Anna for answering all the very difficult questions that were raised today, and the whole ESMA team for organizing this opening hearing. So thank you for everyone. I hope that you will have a lovely weekend ahead of you, and thank you for your participation. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Right.